It was a typical morning, calm and peaceful, as I sat by the window enjoying the view of the lake. My boat was anchored just where I always kept it, a few feet from the shoreline, gently bobbing with the movement of the water. Everything felt perfect, peaceful, tranquil, and all mine. Then I saw them walking up my driveway, two representatives from the Homeowners Association, clipboard in hand, wearing their usual air of authority. They were making their rounds, I guessed. One of them, a woman with a stern expression, stopped right in front of me, holding up the clipboard like it was some sort of badge of power. She didn't even greet me, without so much as a, "Hello." She told me my boat was in violation of the community's aesthetics. She said it didn't fit the look of the neighborhood and that I needed to move it. At first, I thought I had misheard her. A boat? On a lake? In the exact spot it had always been? I asked her to explain. She repeated her concerns, saying the boat was ruining the aesthetic flow of the community. My frustration started bubbling up, but I kept calm. I told her I'd take care of it, but inside I couldn't stop thinking, who were they to tell me what to do with my own property? What gave them the right to come over here and dictate how I used the lake? As they walked away, I stood there in disbelief. They had no clue who they were dealing with. They thought they could boss me around. But little did they know this lake wasn't part of their community, it was mine. And things were about to change. As the HOA representatives walked away, I stood there, fuming, but also thinking deeply about what had just happened. They had no idea what they'd just triggered. They thought they could control every inch of the neighborhood, down to the position of my boat, without realizing the one crucial detail. I owned the lake. For years, I had let things slide. I never had an issue with the HOA, until now. But that small, insignificant comment about aesthetics lit a spark within me. I couldn't let it go. I went back inside, sat at my desk, and began flipping through the paperwork I had on file. There it was, my property deed. It was clear, concise, and undeniable. I was the sole owner of the lake and the surrounding land. I wasn't just some homeowner. I was the one who controlled the water. The HOA, in all their self-righteousness, had no clue. They had been letting their fishing club use my water for years, thinking they had permission to be there. They fished, had their tournaments, and used the lake like it was a public resource. But it wasn't. It was mine. As the truth sank in, I felt a rush of power. I wasn't going to stand for this anymore. The HOA wasn't just meddling in my boating habits. They were trespassing on my property without even realizing it. I quickly drafted a plan in my mind. This was no longer about a boat. It was about ownership, control, and making sure they understood their place. The very next morning, I was going to take action. The fishing club had no idea what was coming for them. It was time to remind them, and the HOA, who truly held the reins. The next morning, I woke up with a clear purpose. The calm I'd felt the day before was replaced by determination. I wasn't going to let the HOA continue acting as though they had any authority over me or my property. I had the paperwork, the legal rights, and now it was time to take action. I sat at my desk, pulled up the necessary documents, and began drafting eviction notices for the HOA's fishing club. This wasn't about petty revenge or personal anger. It was about standing my ground and protecting what was mine. The lake wasn't theirs to use without permission, and I was going to make sure they knew that. I wrote the notices carefully, making sure to word everything in clear legal terms. Effective immediately, all fishing activities, gatherings, and use of the lake are prohibited, I wrote, signing each notice with my name. It was simple, but powerful. I wasn't asking them to leave. I was telling them. This wasn't a request. It was an order. As I printed out the notices, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. They had taken my silence for weakness. But now they were going to see just how serious I was. Once the notices were ready, I began mailing them out to the fishing club members. I also made a few phone calls to ensure they received the message loud and clear. By the end of the day, the eviction was official. I knew it wasn't going to be easy for them to accept, but it didn't matter. I had the right to protect my property, and I wasn't going to let anyone push me around. The message had been sent, and it was only a matter of time before the HOA and the fishing club realized that the lake was mine, and mine alone. The phone calls started pouring in the very next morning. At first, it was just one, then two, and soon I was getting constant calls from members of the fishing club. They were confused, upset, and honestly, a little shaken. The first call came from a man who had been fishing on the lake for years. He asked, almost in disbelief, what the eviction notices meant. I calmly explained that the lake was private property, mine to control, and that they no longer had permission to use it for their fishing activities. His response was one of complete shock. He tried to argue, saying they had been using the lake for as long as anyone could remember. But I wasn't interested in history. I was interested in the law, and the law was clear. The lake belonged to me, and I had every right to ask them to leave. I could hear the hesitation in his voice as he realized the truth. This wasn't some misunderstanding. This was final. The next few calls were no different. The fishing club. Members were upset, frustrated, and scrambling for answers. Some tried to convince me to reconsider, even offering to pay for access to the lake. But it was too late for negotiations. The eviction was already in motion, and there was no going back. I didn't need their money or their excuses. They had crossed a line, and now they had to face the consequences. As the calls continued, I remained calm, knowing that I was in the right. It wasn't personal. It was about what was mine. The HOA, the fishing club, they all had to learn that. I wasn't someone to be pushed around. The lake was mine, and no one was going to take that from me. The aftermath of the eviction notices was almost surreal. As the days passed, the lake, which had once been bustling with fishing boats and chatter, became eerily quiet. I stood by the shore one afternoon, watching the water ripple gently, with no boats in sight. It felt like I had taken control of something that had been slipping through my fingers for far too long. The fishing club was gone, and with it, the constant reminders of how people had been using my property without any regard for my rights. It was a strange kind of peace that settled over me. For years, I had let others enjoy the lake, as if it was a shared resource, never realizing how much control I truly had. The HOA had overstepped, and I had let them. But now the rules had changed. It was empowering to know that I wasn't just a passive homeowner. I was the owner of the water, the shoreline, and everything it touched. As the weeks went by, no one from the HOA came back to challenge me. They must have realized that they had crossed a line they couldn't uncross. The fishing club, once so sure of their right to use the lake, had been sent packing with nothing more than a legal notice. The entire situation had shifted the balance of power in my favor. Looking out over the still waters, I couldn't help but smile. It wasn't just about the lake anymore. It was about standing up for what was mine. The peace I now felt wasn't just from the quiet of the water, but from knowing that I had taken control of my property in a way that would never be questioned again. As time passed, things slowly returned to normal, but in a way, nothing would ever be the same. The HOA had learned their lesson, an expensive, embarrassing one, and they never showed up again with their clipboards or their demands. I knew they had realized that they couldn't push me around anymore. There was no more talk about community aesthetics or telling me how to arrange my boat. The water was mine, and I had made that abundantly clear. The fishing club, too, had moved on, though their absence left a strange quiet on the lake that I had never noticed before, but I wasn't bothered by it. In fact, I welcomed the calm. The lake now felt like it truly belonged to me, not just on paper, but in every sense of the word. I could sit by the water whenever I wanted, enjoying the solitude, knowing that I had taken a stand and secured my space. What had started as a small, seemingly insignificant confrontation had turned into a powerful reminder of personal ownership and the importance of standing up for your rights. I had been pushed to my limits, but in the end, I was the one who had come out on top. The HOA and the fishing club may have thought they could control my property, but I showed them who was truly in charge. Now, whenever I looked out at the lake, I saw more than just water and boats. I saw a victory, one that reminded me that sometimes standing up for yourself is the most important thing you can do. The HOA learned that the hard way, and as for me, I finally had the peace and control I deserved. The lake, my boat, and my property, everything was as it should be. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit the like button, drop a comment, and share it with your friends so they can experience it too. Don't forget to subscribe to Struggle Stories for more incredible tales and real-life victories that will keep you hooked. Join the Struggle Stories community for exciting new content every week. Your next adventure is just a click away.